so exciting to be here. I heard you met, did you all meet the president yesterday? Yeah. How was it? And you meet Michelle Obama tomorrow, right? Yeah. Wow, we get to be sandwiched in between the president and the first lady. We can't go wrong. So exciting to be here and so exciting to see all of you here because you are the ones that are making change, not only in your countries but around the world, because you're setting the pace of change for the rest of us. So it's very exciting for us to be here. And specifically on this panel, because you have such an incredible panel here that are really thinking about how to have, what are ways you can have social change and how to be entrepreneurial in having social change. When we think about entrepreneurship, we largely only think about entrepreneurship in the business sector, but really there's entrepreneurship taking place in social change. And most of you are leading that, and our three panelists are leaders in that space. I hope you will be ready to ask questions. I'm only going to ask a few questions. The rest of it is open to you. And I hope you'll be prepared to participate in this dialogue, because it will very much be a dialogue. So let me just introduce the three speakers here really quickly. First of all, my name is Sonal Shah. I am the Executive Director of the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. Prior to joining the Beeck Center at Georgetown, I was I ran the Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation at the White House. Next to me is Sipho Moyo. She's the Africa Director for the One campaign, where she's been since 2010, and she has such an incredible background. For One, she represents One's global work across Africa. She has spent over 18 years with development experience from the African Development Bank and the World Bank. She has led budget support initiatives. She has led country policy discussions on housing. She served on President Bush's Blue Ribbon Commission on affordable housing. She has a PhD in economics from Howard University in Washington, D.C. Yay! And she has lived in over 10 countries on 3 continents and traveled to more countries than I can count. So welcome, Sipho Moyo.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you for kind.
So Sipho, let me just start with you, and then I'll introduce everybody along the way. Tell us a little bit about why you left the development institutions to actually really go into activism, and what is it that focused you on moving to the One campaign?
That's a really great question. You know, I think what it is I had spent 18 years, like you said, you know, between the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the UN. And my sense was that I had no idea what civil society does, you know, or how civil society works, really. All I knew about civil society was that, particularly in Africa, civil society was on a collision course with governments. And I wanted to really find out how I can be in civil society and not be in a collision course, but in a way just hold government accountable and perhaps convince them that it is a good thing for them to be accountable. So, and I'm sort of glad that I made that transition. At One, we focus on holding leaders to account and, in a sense, you know, influencing policy change. That's really important for us. And the difference between what I did before and what I do now is that in my previous life or in my previous incarnations, my job was to, in a sense, approve projects, fund projects, and supervise projects. You know, so it was about building roads, highways, bridges, schools, hospitals, and so on. And when you do that, you know the impact. You know exactly how many people are going to benefit from it, how many trucks are going to drive on that road, how many farmers' produce is going to go through that infrastructure. But with changing policy, I think the impact is that many times greater, because if you build a school, you know how many kids are going to go there. But if you change an education policy, you've changed the lives of everybody in that country, or even if you multilateralize it, even better on the continent. If you change a health policy, you've changed that many more lives, you know, than if you just built a hospital. And it's great, somebody has to build the hospitals, but it's about bringing everything together and making a real difference. So that's the difference I think that you know, activism and campaigning work really does, is changing policies has, in a sense, a greater impact, you know, and is very complementary to the other work that you know, development partners are doing in terms of actually building the infrastructure, providing the services, and so on.
I hope we can dig into that a little bit more, because I think that's an important point that you make there. Next to Sipho is Alain Chirwisa, and I'm going to say it, I just said it wrong, didn't I? Say it right.
Alain Chirwisa, yeah,
yes.
that's right.
But he goes by Alesh.
Yeah.
Because he is a hip hop artist. And that is what you need to remember. Do not remember anything else I said. He is a hip hop artist. He's from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's a Washington Fellow. He's part of the Civic Leadership Track. He's worked for 5 years, over 5 years, with youth focusing on arts as a tool for activism, civic action, and positive social change. And he's a founder and the artistic director of Mental Engage, focused on empowering hip hop artists with civic and human rights knowledge, social awareness programs. As I mentioned, he is a hip hop artist. He speaks 4 languages: French, English, Kiswahili, and Lingala. He has a BS in International Monetary Science, Economics, Sciences, and you can ask him why he's chosen to go from economics to hip hop artist, which is a good question. And he's creating the Lumbamba Civic and Cultural Center to empower youth in civic engagement, human rights, and artistic skills. So Alesh, tell us a little bit about why you've chosen not only to use hip hop, but how do you use hip hop as a civic engagement tool, and why you think it's important?
Yeah, actually, as many youngsters here, many folks from different countries might know, hip-hop is a universal language, as we used to say, because we're from different countries here, and we have different types of music in our different countries. But I think if there's something in common that we can find from the Congo to Zimbabwe to China to whatever, it's hip-hop, it's that type of music that really gathers so many youngsters. And I'm from the 3rd city of the Congo, which is called Kisangani, and in that city, hip-hop has a great influence in youngsters. And I think that we can know, as we know, hip-hop as a music, but also as a culture, touches so many souls. And you know, like my friend Nancy Lazaro, who's from Tanzania, used to say, people might forget what you did, they might forget what you said, but they will not forget how you made them feel. You know what I mean? And I think that hip-hop touches souls. And originally, hip-hop music or hip-hop culture is about addressing social issues. Today, we know commercial hip-hop and stuff, but the roots of hip-hop were about to address social issues. That's why I chose to be part of those artists who take the risk to use something that gathers so many youngsters, not to make them feel silly, like talking about topics that doesn't make sense, like violence or drugs or what, but to use that same tool to positively change the society. Because most of us here, we have the picture of hip-hop music or of rap music that we have in our head is that picture of commercial hip-hop. And I think that in Africa, we have so many problems, so many challenges that we might consider like our priorities. And our hip-hop, I think that our hip-hop music should be different and address local problems and real problems that make sense to every member of our communities.
So how many of you like hip-hop? Oh, so you have an audience here already.
Yeah, I got some fans right here. Yeah.
I was going to say he's going to perform afterwards, but then we might not have a panel. But I hope you'll go into that a little bit more as to what how hip-hop can also help with greater social change, and especially from where you come from in Democratic Republic of Congo. So that would be great as we move forward. Sure. At the end here, we've got Bill Carter, who is just an incredible person. If you all haven't met him, I hope you'll take the time to meet him also. He's the Ashoka Africa Diamond Leader, director of Ashoka Africa, which is the largest network of social entrepreneurs around the world. For those of you that don't know about it, I hope you'll take the time to learn about Ashoka, because They're doing a lot of great work around the world. He served on Ashoka's international board for 29 years, has selected Ashoka fellows around the world. He guides the overall strategy for Africa, and they support changemaker schools across Africa. What's interesting about Bill is he used to work at EPA with Bill Drayton, who created Ashoka, and then decided while they were working in the government in this fairly decent job to then say, we're going to go create an organization that has the potential to invest in young people who are changing the world. So I hope you'll talk a little bit about that, Bill, and welcome to this event, and thank you for coming here, because I think it'd be great to hear about how you've made that change. How did you go from being on the board of Ashoka to running the Africa program, and why? Why is it important to you?
Well, I had worked, and my work in Africa began in the early 90s when I began interviewing fellows for Ashoka fellowships and all across the continent. And I came to feel that this was Africa's moment, and that Africa was going to be the most powerful, demographically, ultimately economically, continent in the world by the end of this century. And that every one of you are at this pivot point, at this fulcrum, which is really going to define the way the world works, because Africa is going to dictate very much of what the world does over the next century. People don't understand that now. It's still, because people are still focused on countries whose demographics are slightly ahead but will decline in advance of Africa's. And so I thought that it was really time to begin to work particularly with young people in Africa, and to work with our Ashoka Fellows, system-changing social entrepreneurs, with youth venturers. We've just launched a program called Changemaker Schools, and we're going to be rolling out over the next several years, essentially a sort of from primary school, secondary school, right through to university, everyone a change maker, set of initiatives that we're looking to partner and collaborate with people on all across Africa. So all of you I think all of you already know what I am talking about. All of you have that power, and you have that vision, and you understand the power of an everyone a change maker world, and how important that is for Africa, particularly for Africa, and particularly now, to set the foundation for your children and your children's children. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
So, Sipho, I'm going to come back to you for a second, because I think you talked a little bit about policy and why policy change matters. I know the One Campaign works with young people around the world on a regular basis to get to policy change. Tell us a little bit about how you're seeing activism change, and what are the tools and the technologies that people are using, and why people are getting involved now. Why has the momentum grown, and what are you seeing?
Great. First of all, I think that particularly in Africa, citizens are beginning to look more and more to civil society to change the world, to change society, to change the way government works. I think there's an increasing responsibility upon civil society to really lead the way in terms of achieving development. So that's a really huge sort of shifted mindset. And then the second thing I think is that increasingly there is a space for civil society to collaborate, not only with the citizens, who are really sort of part of the greater civil society, but also to collaborate with private sector, to collaborate with government, because the challenges are so immense that really no single, group or entity or part of society can actually make a difference on its own. So collaboration has become really important. For us at the One Campaign, increasingly we're relying on social media. Increasingly we're relying on the new technology to engage citizens. And it's very important for the work that we do engage citizens. On the African continent, we have almost over 2.5 million members. For the whole organization, we have over 6 million members. And this is really important for credibility and for, in a sense, fact-based activism. We run surveys, we find out what is important to the citizens, and recently, of course, we did the Do a Greek campaign which, in a sense has been, a great success because we got over 2 million African citizens to sign on to this campaign using new technology. We reach them by email. In Africa particularly, we reach them on SMS. This is the short message. Yeah, exactly. You guys know it better. So we reach them through SMS. And it's been very interesting just, engaging African citizens because in a way we're getting our direction from them. They're telling us what is important and what really needs to be done. And then in terms of how we work with governments, what we do, because we don't want to increase the burden on government. Government's work is hard enough. So what we do is we monitor their commitments. And we simply go back to them and said, look, you made this promise. Isn't it time you kept it? So we're not asking for anything new. We're not putting new burdens on government. We're simply asking them to keep their commitments, and that's really important. And so the way the Do Agree campaign worked, was such, in a sense, a great example of, the grassroots mobilization, working with the citizens, hearing from them what is important, holding governments to account, and then multilateralizing that. It's a mouthful, but basically that means scaling that to the continent. So you're working at the country level, but then you're also scaling it to the continent. And the great outcome of that was that 3 weeks ago when the African leaders met in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea for the AU summit, they actually signed a strong declaration for agriculture, recommitting themselves to investing in agriculture. And another key component of that, of course, is civil society working together. That's really key. When civil society works together, there's nothing more powerful. And in this particular case, we had 120 civil society organizations in Africa who signed 10 joint policy recommendations that were submitted to the African leaders, of which they actually took on 80% of those recommendations. So it's really about collaboration, and I think we need to fine-tune those skills and build on that model where we're partnering with civil society, we're partnering with citizens and getting their views and voices heard, and we're holding leaders to account.
That's great. Now, how many, all of you use SMS? Raise your hands. How many of you use Twitter? Ah. How many on email? I thought I would just ask because it's the old tried version.
What's interesting is that everyone in this room may be on email, but the average African on the street actually is on SMS more than on email. There's 700 million cell phones in Africa.
Yeah.
So
I agree with you.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
and I just wanted to make a point about this, the importance of technology, of social medias. I think that it allows people to network so easily, and nowadays one of the greatest benefits of those social medias in Africa is that we've assisted to the birth of many e-activists, online activists who are spreading messages according to the community's challenges, through the internet. And I think that now it's really difficult for any government or any politic authority to shut their voices off. And that's one of the most important things, because if those activists were only doing their work through traditional media such as TV, or TV stations, radio stations, or newspaper, it's more easy to track them and to put barriers on their work. But I think that it's a very great step which has been made by using the technology in the activism work.
Yeah, I think technology has certainly helped people have access to more information also, and the ability to not only hold governments more accountable, but then to be able to ask what you can do in your own communities and how to do that. Bill, you're investing in social entrepreneurs across Africa. What are you seeing? What are trends you're seeing? What are the changes you've seen in the last 10, 15 years?
I think one of the biggest is that Africa is now confronting its shift from rural to urban areas, and so we're seeing more and more social entrepreneurs working in the peri-urban and peripheral areas of the large cities, developing people like Ingrid Monroe with Jami Bora, who are essentially creating a whole range of services, mobilizing people living in cities to deal with the influx of more citizens coming in, developing essentially suites of services, financial services, access to education, access to health, access to energy. And so I think increasingly the social entrepreneurs that we're seeing are people who are cross-sectoral, and as Sipho pointed out, the era of the solo practitioner is over. This is a team of teams world that we're working in now. The quicker you can get into team of teams world, the quicker you can create teams that are based on and interact based on empathy-based ethics, because you're not playing in a world where there are rules. You're creating the new protocols in which this world is going to function in Africa. So what we're seeing is in part a response to quite a number of people moving into urban areas. Another thing that we've seen is Africans really beginning to take, and as you were just talking about, Alain, the ability of technology to leapfrog and essentially put power in the hands of citizens all over Africa. The ability to essentially access, we've just seen enormous increases in the number of really creative new social ideas coming out of social entrepreneurs coming out of Africa, is spurred in part by the access that you're talking about to SMS technology. And that's been really important. And we're also seeing Africans really re-examining in a very fundamental way, which is very interesting, the issue of the links between agriculture, for example, and nourishment, and whether their communities are being fully nourished and how, and where they aren't, and what the roles of young people should be in this. We're seeing more social entrepreneurs working on that, and the role of elders in this process. So the interesting thing is that the e-commerce, this e-idea that you can put power in the hands of young people, is also offering Africans just cross-sectoral an opportunity to really re-examine sort of some of the fundamental challenges: health, wellness, access to nourishment, access to clean water, that they didn't really have the power to, they didn't have that power themselves. And rather having gone through this long period that was, so many of the societies that are working with Africa were pre-E for too long, right? And they developed programs and thoughts and habits of mind that were pre-E. But now you have in Africa a society that's really beginning to confront its urbanization and its transition issues in a completely E-era. Mm-hmm. And that just gives, so in some cases you just see disconnects. Cross-cultural disconnects in that area, cross-sectoral disconnects, and the work that you all are doing in this area is really going to be pivotal to making sure that Africa makes that transition much faster and much more successfully than some of the societies that have had to face that transition recently in the 20th century.
So, how many of you have questions? There we go. We'll start with questions. Is there a mic? We have some coming around on both sides. Can we start right here? There's a mic right behind you. And can you give us your name and where you're from?
Thank you. I'm Ivan Collinson from Mozambique.
Okay.
And my question is, do you see social entrepreneurship as a response to incompetence and failure or inability of some of our governments in Africa, even in US? If not, what is the difference? Thank you.
Great question. Do one of you want to start with that, or do you want to, Sipho, Bill, why don't you start, and then we'll... Sure.
I think that the social entrepreneurship really took off beginning in around 1980. It grew out of a realization that the citizen sector had been really mired. It hadn't been a rate of growth at all for hundreds of years. The business sector had, but the citizen sector had been largely controlled by government and religious organizations. The rate of growth had been flat, and so economic growth had taken off. There had been no corresponding increase on the social side, and so you had all the dislocations that we're all familiar with in all of our societies. And it was like a big bang, right? It's just the explosion that took place and has now been sort of, that universe that's been expanding, that's expanding all over Africa, is touching all the countries in the world. And it's the understanding, right, that a citizen can have a system-changing new idea and change their society. A citizen can take action, put together a team of people and address, and a citizen can be as entrepreneurial in society as a business entrepreneur can be in business. And in fact, the thing that we were focused on beginning in 1980, which has played out, is that the business sector has become more socially conscious. The citizen sector has become a lot more entrepreneurial. We're at that point of synthesis now, and it's reflecting it isn't anybody's fault or anything. In terms of history, this was the time when social entrepreneurship stood up, and it came along at a very fortuitous time, I think, for Africa.
And Alain, why don't you add to that a little bit as to why did you, for yourself, believe that it was important from being a hip-hop artist to also participating in social change?
Yeah, for me it was really important because I think that social entrepreneurship is a response to a system failure. And from where I come, in my country, the DRC, I think that we have so many issues which are caused by that system. I mean, the governmental failure, all those ministries who are in charge of social change, of employment, youth employment, all those sectors. I think that the problem for us came when we start trying to resolve all the problems in the traditional way. So I think that our youngsters, our communities left all the charge to the government, who was supposed to resolve the social issues by traditional ways. I mean, like providing formal jobs, educating in the formal education system. That means in school bench, on school benches and stuff. And the society really forgot the informal part of the education. So for me, it was really innovative because most of people trying to tackle the social problems in the formal way were falling down because, you know, I mean, it was so enormous. The problem was so huge that people didn't know where to start and where to end. So I think that it's really important. It was really important to me to sensitize youngsters about how solution can come when we have youngsters getting involved and trying to find informal ways to resolve problems. And the only mean that could do that was that tool, that music, which allows youngsters to be gathered first, and then after, through that mean, to take time to call other experts, like I can give an example of Bill or somebody else, for Stanley Nyekula and stuff, to come and explain people how to get engaged in this field, how to get engaged in that field. I might not have all the expertise because I'm more artistic, but with my network, because I travel around the world and I meet different people, I use my networks, you know, to empower those youngsters. And I couldn't do it if I was not doing hip-hop music. And I think that all of us here in this room gotta try to look for a way to resolve problems with the assets that we have.
Great. I think we have a question on this side. Right here in the middle. Or actually, right here in the front. Sorry, right here. Apologies. Again, can you give us your name and where you're from, if you don't mind?
Good morning. My name is Zone Zero. I'm from Cameroon. My question goes to Sipho. Actually, I would like to know how you ensure that the SMS you send are actually received. For instance, like the telephone numbers are active, and also these SMS you send, do your recipients send back feedback through SMS? Thank you.
That's a great question.
Great.
Sipho?
Should I take it
Please.
right away? Okay, good. So, very good questions, actually. We do work with phone companies and, telecommunication companies like, MTN, Vodacom, and so on. So we work with them, and we also get the databases, current databases from the companies. And sometimes we also get the numbers directly from our members who are on email and so on. And the way we know that they have received them is because, well, not everybody responds, but I think we have a relatively high response rate, like above average. I'm sorry, I can't give you that number right now because I don't remember it, but we have a very high response rate. And so they respond, and if it's a survey, they'll answer what the issues are. If it's, a campaign, they will sign on to the campaign and say they agree with the campaign, and they'll sign, against the petition. So we know from the results. For example, we did a collaboration with young African artists, from Alain's country, we worked with Fally Ipupa, and from Nigeria, we worked with Diba, and so on. I don't know how many of you have heard of coconut chocolate. Okay, some people, that's good. Maybe we should play it here. So, the music collaboration was great. We had 19 artists from 11 countries singing in 10 languages, and on one message, which was Do Greek. And so we know from the downloads, how many people have actually seen that SMS and downloaded the song. We know from the number of petition signers, which was 2.2 million people signed the petition. So we know that there is, the message is getting across, and it's, in a sense, it's achieving the results that we're looking for. So, and we found that actually in Africa, SMS is the most reliable way to reach the majority of African citizens, which is why our partnership with the telecommunications companies is very important. And I want to point out that this is a good example of a collaboration with private sector. Because what it means for private sector is that they're doing well while they're doing good. So they're still making profit, but they're also contributing to an important social cause, as this one.
Yeah. And I think just to only add to that, I think the technology is only going to get better to help us track better. But for right now, I think you take correlations as well as you can in terms of figuring out what's the best use. Absolutely. We have a question here, right up front, right there, perfect. Apologies. Again, your name and where you're from.
My name is Nancy Lazaro, and I am from Tanzania. My question goes to the hip-hop artist, and we've seen many hip-hop artists who are singing songs that promote negative images about women and girls. And these can only widen the gap of gender inequality. What are your thoughts on this? Because we need positive messages, and we need gender equality to be a reality. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Oh, gosh.
I can see that it's a serious issue. I might acknowledge that the hip-hop stereotype, especially in rap, is that, we rappers want to get the street credit, what we call street credit, by being violent in our speeches, in our lyrics, by being disrespectful, especially disrespectful towards women. And you can see that through the videos, the type of videos that we hip-hop artists make. I personally don't agree. I'm not part of those artists, and I really think that women deserve another treatment, a respectful treatment. That's even why with my association, we've launched in March an album called Get Loud, which gathered 22 different musicians from 5 different cities of the Congo. Get Loud, in fact, is an album dedicated to women and girls, which tackles different challenges that women face in the Congo in their daily life, going from the access to education for that little girl, going to to the use of rapes as a weapon. You know, I mean, I'm part of those artists. This reminds me yesterday, President Obama right here, who said there are some traditions, because I think this is a part of the hip-hop tradition. There are some bad traditions that we gotta ban, that we have to ban. And yeah, I'm really sorry. I can apologize for other hip-hop artists, but I think that the most we have conscientious artists in that field, the most people who are making it, who are reaching a high level, give another type of message to younger generation, the better the picture of hip-hop music will be in the future. I think it's a permanent work. I'm not supposed to say I have the answer right here, but I think we can start to work on it now to get better results in 5 or 10 years.
Question back here.
Clement from Madagascar. My question is to all of you. How would you promote activism in developing countries where access to technology is still very limited and costly, and as more than half of the population still live with less than $2 per day? Thank you.
Great question. Sipho, do you want to take that? And then Bill, do you want to address some of that too? Sure. That would be great.
Great question.
Can you repeat that question? Because I'm not sure everybody heard it.
Okay, so the question was, how do we use activism in countries where technology is not as prevalent and the majority of people still live below $1 a day? Something like that, yeah? Okay, great. So I think the first thing, just from my experience, is that it's really important to engage citizens. And by that I mean is hearing from them what their challenges and priorities are. So it's not about imposing an agenda on them. It's not about coming and telling them what's important. It's about hearing from them what is important. And that has nothing to do with $1 a day or not. If something is important to them, they will get engaged. And yes, while majority of African citizens do have a basic cell phone on them, you're right, there are areas on the continent that are really hard to reach. And so that's where the partnership really comes in, because if civil society is working together, you have partners in every country who can reach the most hard to reach areas, remote areas, the most, back of beyond, regions of the country, and so on. So you can reach people in that way. But I think the most important thing is really making sure that the priorities belong to them, because the challenges are felt by them really, are dealt with them on a day-to-day basis. So I think I've sort of answered that question, because, so it's SMS, it's radio, it's actually going out there, engaging them, and most importantly, it's hearing from them what matters to them, and dealing with that, and then promoting the work and that. And it has to be fact-based. We now like to call ourselves factivists, because our activism is fact-based. It's research-driven, it's data-driven, and that's really important. So.
Yeah, I'd also want to add something, or try to give one of the partners that we can find even in areas where technology does not exist, because we find such areas in different countries in Africa. I think one of the partners that we should always think about are the faith-based communities, because I know that in Africa we're so spiritual, no matter what our religion is, but I bet in each village, even where you cannot find electricity, you can find a church. And I think that this is a partner that most of us have learned a lot about this partnership with the faith-based community at Tulane University in Louisiana, where I attended my 6 weeks training. Today, I think that it's really important in the community problems to also involve not only the international organizations, not only the government or local or other local organizations, but also to think about the faith-based communities, because I think they're one of those organizations which has a very powerful influence on people's views in Africa.
That's a very good point. Bill, as you think about finding out social entrepreneurs around Africa, like how do you think about kind of making sure all communities are represented and you're not just going to the popular ones, but you can get out to the communities where it's getting hard to get access?
Yeah, you know, one of the issues the technology brings is for most people in Africa, particularly in remote areas, the question is if you're going to make an investment in solar or you're going to make that's a capital investment, and so you really have to know that technology is going to work, right? And so what we're seeing is a number of social entrepreneurs now that are bringing the technology, the ability to actually fix solar, because solar works and then it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't. Then your capital investment is wiped out. And if you've made it's a very significant investment for a family or a community. And so we're seeing more social entrepreneurs now stepping into the space and saying, hey, we've got to make sure the technology works. We've got to make sure we can share the technology. The other thing I would say is that there's just no there's no alternative to really just hard work. If you look at the Northern Rangelands Trust in Kenya, covers 25,000 square miles, is run by a council of elders drawn from the pastoralists in the area, and it's a well-functioning and it's increasing in scope and size. It's providing livelihoods to more than 250,000 now, almost 500,000 pastoralists in that area, who are balancing the needs for their population, their education, and improving roles for women, and also improving the work for the environment. The challenges, I think, well, we all face these challenges, but they're extremely poignant in Africa because, again, it's not a solo practitioner, it's not a team of teams, it's not one sector. You really have to be able to work in a cross-sectoral way, and you have to work patiently to take people through the change in the habits of mind, whether it's a young person who can hear Alain perform and then say, I can dream of doing this, and then go out and do it, or taking a group of elders who, and basically taking them through the process of how do you become effective stewards in an environment where all the economics have been running negative for them for for decades. When it turns around, how do you become an effective steward? Because you, the elders, have to be the cross-sectoral balancers. So I think we're seeing more work amongst social entrepreneurs going on in those areas, both and in terms of making sure that the technology infrastructure is supported by a social infrastructure.
Great. I'm going to try to take 2 questions at a time so we can answer them. But just to wrap up on this conversation, many of you are going to be leaders in your own places, and it's going to be up to you to remember how you're going to make sure communities are included in the conversation. And that's going to be part of your own challenge, is to make sure that it's not just the usual suspects that you talk to, but that you're also talking to others in the community that may not be heard. But it will be part of your responsibility to do that, and I think that's important. So I hope you take away from all 3 of these answers that there are multiple ways of getting to them, but make sure that as a leader, you're making sure you're hearing multiple conversations. I'm going to take 2 here, right here in the front.
Thank you very much. My name is Lucy Atieno. I come from Uganda. My question goes to Sipho. Many times we see civil society organizations competing against each other as opposed to collaborating. They don't want to share information, or because they're reporting a specific donor and they don't want the other to know, they'll compete and not collaborate. What's your comment on that? Thank you.
So, and can we just take 1 or here too?
Oh, gosh.
My name is Sarah M. Johnson. I'm from Liberia, and my question goes to Sipho. I think the problem in Africa is not about changing the policy. It's about implementing the policy, because there are good policies that we have back in Africa. And considering your previous background working with the World Bank on implementing projects in Africa and now going into activism, what are some of the major challenges that you face because they are not the same?
Great questions. So, yeah, these are two very tough questions, one on competing versus collaborating and the other on implementing versus policy change.
Okay, I'm really on the spot. So, first question, what's my comment about, competing versus collaborating? It's really what's my attitude. My attitude is I don't care who gets the credit. I just want the work to be done. And this is how I approach my friends on the continent. This is how I approach civil society. This is how I approach partners and everyone that I work with, is I don't really care who gets the credit. Let's agree on the issues that we agree on. Let's work together on what we agree on. And the things that we don't agree on, let's find other people who agree with us on those issues. So for me, it's really about moving the needle forward on issues that affect the people that we care about. And it's about, not getting the credit, but getting the results. And I think that's a very helpful approach because, it's really about what's the one thing we can all agree on, what are the 10 points that we agree on? Let's come together on that. Forget the 150 other ones, just the 10 that we agree on, and you get sort of the coalition of the willing on those 10 points, and you come together. So it's for me, it's never about the credit. It's always about achieving the goal that we want to achieve and helping to change the lives of the people that we care about. So,
and Sipho, when you approach it that way, do you find that people come to the table that were originally competing with you, and how does that process work?
It's incredible. It works like a charm. And the thing is, it's really incredible because I think it changes the mindset of everybody around the table, and everyone comes with the same approach about this is about a goal, this is about an objective, this is about an issue that is important, and that becomes the focus. It really becomes about how are we making a difference rather than who's going to get the credit for it. So yeah, and then another really tough question. From Sarah from Liberia. The first thing I think, the difference between, working in the multilateral development agencies and being in civil society is that I no longer write checks. I used to be responsible for a portfolio close to $1 billion. I don't write checks anymore. What I focus on is about changing policies, trying to help, to build the capacity of other civil society partners so that there's a critical mass of civil society, and civil society is as broad as you've heard from my colleagues up here. We've worked very collaboratively with faith-based organizations, with young people, with even private sector or social entrepreneurs and so on. So it's really about, raising the awareness, first of all, that there are commitments that have been made, and then holding governments accountable on that, and then bringing in the expertise of those who are able to help with actually moving the needle forward in terms of the implementation. And the agriculture campaign is such a great example. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but it's such a great example because it started from the grassroots. It was the citizens who said, this is important to us. And then it was them that actually began to put the pressure. And then we began to have the conversations with governments and say, you know what, what's good for the citizens is good for the government. Because now it's really about creating jobs. I'll tell you what we know about agriculture. 70% of our people rely on agriculture for their livelihood. Over 30% of Africa's GDP comes from agriculture. In terms of a multiplier effect, it is 11 times more effective at reducing extreme poverty than growth in any other sector, including mining, oil, and gas. So this is about creating jobs. We have 10 million young Africans who are joining the job market every single year. And this is the single greatest opportunity for creating inclusive growth on the African continent. And I just think that, the penny has dropped, leaders are actually realizing that if they don't do something about agriculture, if they don't invest in agriculture in a way that grows or develops the entire value chain and creates what the international labor calls decent jobs, if they don't do that, if they don't make the people who feed us, capable of feeding themselves, if they don't broaden sort of the economic base and the revenue base for the countries, we are going to have a big social problem in Africa. You know, we're going to have an implosion. And this is something that we all want to avoid. And, you know, that's why I'm just blown away by all of you. I've spoken to about 50 of you between yesterday and today. And just hearing the amazing work that all of you are doing and, you know, in different areas of endeavor, you know, really gives me a lot of hope that we can actually begin to change the way that government is run in Africa, not just from the point of view of having, you know, amazing policies, but making sure that they're implemented, because all of us are beginning to hold our leaders to account. And like I said, increasingly, you know, societies are looking up to civil society to actually help to make a difference. So.
How many of you are thinking about working in government or are working in government? So I think this is a very important, you're a very important audience, because as you all think about your roles within government, implementation of the policies that are set out will be very much a part of what you do, and it's actually quite critical. So hopefully everything that you've said, Sipho, will be a part of the conversation as they lead. Bill, I just want to bring you in for a second. You know, you support a lot of individual social entrepreneurs in Africa. How do they collaborate, or what do you see in terms of collaboration versus competition from the way Ashoka operates and what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very clear now that collaborative entrepreneurship is essentially the way to go. That, you know, what we found with our own experience is people who try to go it alone wind up with their organization sort of reaching a certain level, very often at a local level or maybe a regional level, and stalling out because they haven't aggressively looked, they haven't designed it at the beginning what their relationship is going to be between them and their partners and their networks. If you look at, if you look at the most successful social entrepreneurs out there, people like Sylvia Banda in Zambia, Ian Craig in the Northern Rangelands Trust, Jami Bora, you know, Usahidi. These are organizations that are designed. They are collaborative network based by design, and so I think that that's the most important thing now. As you move forward, you're really thinking about how do we design it so that we aren't just competing with each other. How do we from the beginning? Because if you don't do it, if you don't design it in from the beginning, then you tend to sort of lock into, you know, tough behavior patterns, and then find yourself kind of your ability to grow limited. So how do you design in the kinds of collaboration? How are your insights influenced by the fact that that's the way you want to work? Who do you reach out to? Who are the other people based on empathy-based ethics who are launching endeavors that are similar to yours? How can you collaborate? How can you build something larger? If you're thinking about that right from the beginning, I think you're going to be a lot more likely to be successful, whether you're in Africa or anywhere around the world. But that is such a clear trend. And I think it's going to be the key to, as Sipho's been talking about accountability here and the power of social media to translate that into accountability. It's exactly this form of collaboration, right? When a community realizes who it is and what its strength is and what its voice is, then the ideas that'll come out of that take accountability to the next level, right? That's the fruit of collaboration, right? And that's what the social entrepreneurs are the most successful social entrepreneurs in Africa that we're seeing are doing.
I'm going to take two questions from this section, and then we'll come back to this section. So there's two in the middle, if you can get the two there, and then we'll come back.
Good morning. My name is Gillian. I'm from South Africa, and I identify as a social activist. I work very similar to you with young people, looking at how do you use the creative arts as a tool. And one of the biggest challenges I found is that although sort of technology and the digital age help us do our work better, and it's easier and it's cheaper to communicate with people, it also creates a culture of slacktivism where young people are okay with clicking like on Facebook or retweeting, but that is it. That is where their engagement stops. And I've been looking at how do you extend that engagement to go back to activism for what it really is? How do you get young people to come to a workshop on a Saturday, to put up posters in the area, to talk to other young people? And how do you get them to actually implement sort of social action projects where action is more important and they focus on the outcome? So you spoke about sort of the SMS programs that you run, Sipho, and I find that those are the type of programs where people respond to you with an SMS, and I get many SMSs back from when I send out the general message, and I find that there's not enough to draw them in and to sort of bring the conversation to sort of entrepreneurship and how we use that for social action. Governments and businesses do not want to fund the arts. They do not want to fund young people working as artists, and they're not interested in how sort of young artists turn their passion into products that they can sell. So what are the options for funding those type of young people, and how do you deal with sort of this phenomenon of slacktivism? That's sort of a lot of the organizations, global organizations, are actually making it a lot worse because they do a lot of their activism through social media and through the internet.
Great, thank you. There's multiple questions in that one question. So we'll come back to that. Can we, go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Mikael Ardiso, and I'm from Ethiopia. My question is also related to the one which was just asked, but on activism and particularly in using the ICT and the digital media, how do you make sure that the agendas that you actually try to lobby for will not be transformed into unintended actions or consequences, such as, for instance, because you deal with some fluid issues and agenda in some countries, how do you make sure that they are not transformed into unintended consequences, such as leading to the Arab Spring and other effects? So how do you actually make sure that you protect this from happening in those areas? Thank you.
These are two great questions, and consistently great questions. So the first one, I think, very important, I think for all three of you, but just to really think about, and Alesh, maybe we can start with you, which is, how do you go from people wanting to be supportive to actually doing something? And then on the technology side, how do you go from beyond the like to actually actively participating, not just passively participating? So how do we get to active engagement? And then the second one, really to think about, how do we answer these unintended consequences? The good thing about information is you have access to it. The bad thing about information is everybody has access to it, and it has an impact on you. So how do you think about that in today's world? So Alesh, do you want to start with the first in terms of activation? As people come together, how do you actually actively get them to come together to do stuff? And Sipho, maybe you can take one from there too.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I'm also one of those people who use new technologies or social medias for activism. And I'm also one of those who think that it's not enough to click on like. It's about going down in action after that like. That's why I think that it's really important to collaborate effectively with the community in bringing together people, especially youngsters. We gotta reach that point where we go beyond the virtual world. And if it's an organization, for example, it's really important to, after that, if you're fighting, for example, you're fighting for a cause. I remember in 2011, there were a very controversial election in the Congo presidential election. And we started a project which was called Kimia Kaka, which means only peace, because the main message was we only want peace. And we start from the internet. We explained our project and told to the youngsters, especially those from the eastern part of the Congo, who think that it's really important for us to run this project and to tackle the problem of cultivating the peace during that time, because it was a very delicate time for us. And we saw so many, through our Facebook fan page, we saw so many likes. And then the next step was how to calm down, how to make a reflection session between us, how to come together, reflect together, but beyond that virtual world. So we called in different cities, we organized clubs. We organized clubs youngsters came, we talked with them, we talked with artists. We got into recording songs, broadcasting the videos, and then making events that gathered those youngsters, and then we talked. People, I mean, different artists who were there had different influence on the youngsters. And at the end, our conclusion was that when we have that opportunity of gathering people in physics after a virtual broadcasted call for causes, it's really important to do it. So that's a way to come up with a concrete action for youngsters. Because if we don't step up and propose youngsters to come together, propose community members to come together in physics, and just limit our actions in pedagogical actions, I mean, our cause will be a failure. I don't know if you're satisfied from the answer. Really? Good? Okay, I'm happy. Because I always make sure, thank you. I always make sure that I really reach that point where I answer to your question and to your preoccupation. But your question was so tough, and you know, I mean, it's something I really want all of you to get interacted with us and think about a lot of things, even after this hour.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's an honor for me. I see a lot of critical minds in here, and it's an honor for me, you know, to discuss about some challenges. I will also have questions for you, because now I can't, but I mean, after this hour, I will also ask you questions, because I don't have answers to all the questions, to all the problems.
Yeah, I think Alain, you make a very important point, which is, in many ways, you're asking us questions and we're giving you answers, but recognize that we're also processing this information, and it's an input as well as an output. So you're also feeding in input as time goes on, and we're assessing this and thinking about this as we move forward too. So don't assume that this is just a one-way dialogue, even though it is right now. We hope you'll continue to make this a two-way dialogue. So Sipho, do you want to take this on too? Because I think your activism is slightly different from how Alain is doing it, which is bringing people in and actually getting them, both the virtual and the physical, together.
Exactly. So yes, the really tough question about how to move people from just supporting or liking an action to actually doing and engaging something. And I think that takes me back to what I said earlier on. The starting point is really important. It's how you engage the citizens in the very first instance. The issues have to be their issues. So if in the first instance, this is an issue that they think is important, if this is an issue that they think, you know, they want help pushing on, then it's not just about liking. And I'll give again an example. In Uganda, they have the You Report and You Reporters. It's really about, you know, using the technology, you know, to deliver services. It's about making sure that, you know, you report on the stockouts, whether it's about vaccines or HIV and AIDS medications, and so on. You know, so You Reporters are reporting on, you know, what is available in the clinics and making sure that they're restocked before they run out, and so on. And then on the Do Agree campaign, for example, I want to go back to that in terms of how we're engaging people beyond just signing a petition. What is interesting is that they're coming back to us. You know, these 2.2 million young Africans who have signed this petition are coming back to us. We've got so many young graduates who are every day, you know, coming back to us and saying, look, I've just graduated. How do I get access to credit? I really want to go into agriculture, or I want to go into agribusiness. So it's becoming a substantive conversation, because this is about changing the lives of people. It's about creating jobs. It's about leaving people better off. And people are actually engaging. So they've gone beyond signing a petition or liking it on Facebook, and they want to know how they can get access to credit, how they can get land. You know, how can they buy or lease or borrow land? You know, how can they move their produce to market? How can they get export licenses? How can they do better packaging, you know, to increase to add value to their produce for those who are already in farming? So there's a lot of young people who are already engaged in that space. So, and then on the second question, there was the unintended consequences. That was the question. That's a really good question because civil society in Africa is operating to a large extent in a very difficult space. It's not easy being in civil society in Africa. Let's just put that up front right there. It's a very difficult environment to operate in, and avoiding unintended consequences is really an important question. And then again, I think it's really about, how do you engage the people? Where do the issues, originate from? Are they the people's issues? And then how do you involve, the policymakers? That's also important, and we shouldn't shy away from it. It is sometimes challenging. It's more difficult in some countries than in other countries. In other countries, I think increasingly government is beginning to realize the importance of engaging civil society and being non-threatened by civil society, because potentially there is a real partnership there, that can actually help to move the needle forward if they work together to achieve the common goal, which is, to reduce poverty and make, leave our people better off. So it's a very tricky question. We don't have the answers for that. Different countries really have different challenges, but it's important to always make sure that, the issues belong to the people. They cannot be imposed. The issues must be grassroots issues that come from the local people, the local communities and the local societies, and we're all working together for a common cause. And I think it's really important to highlight in these instances that there is a common agenda. There's got to be something that, civil society, faith-based communities, government, private sector, celebrities can agree on. There's got to be something you can agree on certain particular issues, and it's good to focus on that. And then just to go back to the other question, I wanted to say that, the reason it's important to engage everybody, you might be wondering why we're engaging, celebrities and artists and musicians. They have incredible influence. Alain, I don't know how many followers you have on Twitter, but I can only imagine. And how many friends you have on Facebook. They have incredible influence. And in the case of the Do a Great campaign, when you have D'banj saying, I'm changing my name from the Cocoa Master to the Cocoa Farmer, wow. That just moves, a whole lot of young people to start thinking, if D'banj is going to roll up his sleeves and be a farmer, I want to be a farmer too, So it's all about collaboration and, working with everybody to inspire
And I think you make two very important points, which is, one, activism and especially civic activism isn't always the easy thing to do. And it's not, I will say it's not just in Africa, I think around the world, actually, the challenges are being faced, whether you're in the Middle East or whether you're in India or other places. Civic activism means you're challenging current authority. And that is a challenge, but collaboration has a way to get around that and to really think about new ways of bringing more people into the solutions. Bill, do you want to take I don't know which one you want to answer, but I particularly wanted to also get you in on the unintended consequences.
Yeah, just briefly on the activism, just two observations. One is that Ashoka's been doing some work the last several years with a methodology that's developed that it transfers to youth-serving organizations. We started piloting it in Kenya, and we're finding that we're up to the thousands of youth ventures. The key to it is getting young people. It has to be their idea. If it's top-down activism, you should care about AIDS, you should care about this, you care about that. That turns, our experience is, if you give a young person an opportunity to define what their new idea is, what their issue is, and to put together a team and actually go out and do it and support them in that and have the community be involved, that's something that they will carry with them. You can't take that away from them. They have now become, right, a person who has the ability to express their own ideas. So I think we found that to be a very helpful way of working with youth-serving organizations, and we're expanding that work now rapidly. The other thing, the other initiative that we're seeing is, I think for better or for worse, young people are in schools. And so the Changemaker Schools initiative that we have is really designed to look at where do you have schools where there are a very, very large proportion of kids who are change makers. And some of the initial work we've done, we're just electing the first 20 or so schools now, and we're going to be adding another 10 or so from South Africa, hopefully by the early September. And what we're finding is that the schools that have the highest proportion of change makers aren't the elite schools, right? They're the schools where the change leader understands that there's a mission beyond the immediate mission of educating. There are schools that are very heavily based in empathy-based ethics, but because the kids can connect that mission of the school beyond the immediate mission of education, right, that there is a broader purpose. This school has a purpose of creating more schools like it to help kids who are developmentally disabled. This school has as its goal to demonstrate that the Kenyan educational curriculum can be taught in poor areas. You can't just use it as an excuse for non-performance. In other words, and those kids can see that, they know they're part of that, and then they are themselves, that school, that change leader has the power to articulate that vision for their school and transfers that power, right, that agency to the young people to pursue their own, to pursue their own youth ventures, which comes back to the youth venture concept. So I think that there's a lot in agency. I think there's a lot in practice. There's a lot in finding the social entrepreneurs who are actually leading schools, who are really, and who are essentially incubating a new generation of social entrepreneurs as well. So I think I would point to that and hope that we can, in South Africa, that perhaps we can collaborate on with some of the upcoming schools that will be chosen in the Changemaker school process.
So we're going to take 2 rounds of rapid questions at this point because we're going to run out of time. So one here, one right in the front, and then one right back there, please.
Thank you very much.
Right here in the front. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Zaruddin Umar. I'm a civil servant working with the Bauchi State government. And my question really goes to social media. We've understood perfectly that social media is a tool for promoting good governance, wider participation, collaboration, and an avenue for establishing an open government. In a situation whereby you find yourself working with some government officials that don't want to be open, it becomes a kind of threatening to yourself or your work. And what kind of measures could be taken against such officers or top government officials that wouldn't want to be open, and considering the risk that such employee will be facing by the time he wants to establish that open government using the social media? Thank you.
Great question. Right here in the front.
My name is Sahra Said Bila. I'm from Somalia. So my question is, I agree the importance of working with each other with civil society organizations, business entrepreneurs, and government. So my question is, who is responsible that they coordinate and collaborate with each other? Do we need a coordination office, or anyone in the citizen can take that responsibility to make sure that they work with each other?
It's a great question. And then one right back here.
Thank you. My name is Aidenbu from the Gambia and from Morgan State University. I had a question actually with regards to the social media issue. And I wanted to ask you are we confusing social media and ICT as a tool for transparency in way we work in governments, et cetera? And how do you address the challenges that we see now being faced in America and England in the first world, where social media was embraced as a tool for transparency, et cetera, and now it's become this monster that's turning around, and there are more challenges in addressing them, particularly legally, when it comes to defamatory issue, libel issues, et cetera. And how do you looking at those issues, how are you now going to make sure that you're able to address them before they become a problem in Africa? Because we don't have the institutional endowments to address defamation, libel, et cetera, and you have a lot of people pretending to be, journalists, bloggers, et cetera, that use this vacuum to violate a lot of people's rights and protections as well. So how do you factor this into your activist work that you're doing?
These are incredibly good questions, and I think the both of your questions on social media, I would say, I think, are challenges that we're all still working through. I'm not sure there's a full answer to this, but I'm going to let Sipho, you want to start with this, and then Bill, you might want to take on a little bit of this. But this is, I think, important, recognizing that social media can be used as an open government tool, but is it itself an open government tool? Does ICT have a role to play in thinking about open government? But then how do you manage to the downsides of that, which is if you don't actually have facts, but the facts become the social media creates a fact as opposed to it being a fact. How do you manage to that?
Like, Sonal, like you said, these are really, important and big questions that we probably don't have, the right answers to, but I think, clearly where, facts are being created that are not facts, I think there's issues of illegality and, and that sort of thing. And I think, crimes should just be prosecuted. If someone is committing a crime, they probably should just be prosecuted. But it's a really fine line, and it's not such a straightforward answer. It's also about working in a really difficult environment where the work that, that maybe bloggers are doing can be taken out of context or can be used against them just because it's not favorable to the authorities and so on. Really challenging questions, I would say, but it's really, I think we do need to be more careful. What is encouraging is that I think more and more governments, particularly in Africa, are signing up to the Open Government Initiative. Tanzania is a really great example, and so on, and using ICT, to build sort of the accountability mechanisms, within the governance structures. So those are really key issues, and I think it will get better, and there's lessons to be learned from what is happening in North America, as you pointed out. There's lessons that can be learned from that. So yeah, and then there was the question about
how do you do collaboration?
Collaboration, yeah. I think it's really, it's on the ground, it's on the issues, it's about coming together as partners who, agree on a particular issue, or what we might call the coalition of the willing on a particular issue. What you want to avoid, or certainly what we avoid, is signing too many, MOUs and those kinds of things. They're not worth the paper they're written on. It's just about the action, just get down to the issue. If there's something that's important, work together on that, because you're gonna spend the rest of the partnership trying to, interpret every word on the MOU. So, MOUs for me don't work, it's really just about the action and getting on, rolling up our sleeves and doing the work that needs to be done. But then again, I think different organizations have different experiences and different preferences. But in our case, we just find that, tackling the issue and forging ahead is more important than, signing a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think, one of the areas where this comes up, has come up really very poignantly, is the speak for issue, right? Because particularly in the development world, a lot of people acquired the habit of speaking for people and speaking about them. And so, yeah, I think one of the answers, I was sort of mulling this as you were asking the question, and the first fellow that came to mind for me was a guy, really a pair of social entrepreneurs, Harry Jonas and Kabir Bhavagadi, who created natural justice. What is natural justice? Natural justice is an effort for people, for pastoralists. They started focusing on pastoralists in Southern Africa. But essentially, how do you put your protocols out? How does that community put its protocols out and say, if you're going to engage with us, mining interests, whatever you are, government, economic development, here's how we roll. Here's how our culture works. Here what our interests are. Because I think that the real answer here is there aren't our privacy everywhere Africa has been rolled back so far, so fast, that collectively and individually all around the world, we're having to go back and essentially create our own natural, we're having to go back now and create the protocols and processes by which we were going to engage with the world, so that other people aren't speaking for us on our behalf about us. And until we have that power, again, it gets back to the issue of can we work as a solo practitioners of teams? In this world, you can't. If we're going to have, if that's going to work for a pastoralist in Southern Africa, it's the same natural justice, right? It's that same process of protocol setting. If you want to have communities that are nourished communities that nourish in Africa, you've got to have protocols. It's the same thing they're trying to struggle with in Europe and elsewhere. Our issues are all the same around the world. And I think, and it's that whole, that we are engaged in now. It's that is the critical task for all of us here, which is what are the protocols in our community that we're going to set, so by which we're going to be understood in our communities around the world, so people understand and can engage with us. And when people who want to engage with us in a way that's not proper, not right, and that we can spot that. And right now we're just in the beginning stages of doing that work.
So 2 questions. We'll take one from each of these corners here in the middle. One here, right here, please. And then just really quickly before we go on to the next questions, in terms of open government and social media, we should separate those 2 slightly. Open government is when government can release its information and make it available to citizens so they can do something with it, whether it's researchers or others. Social media has is slightly more activism in terms of how do you get people activated as to what's happening, what they could read, what they could do. Both of those things are not always the same things, and I think sometimes we combine those 2 things, and it's not always the same. I do think the value of social media is that it has the potential to activate people, but it's also inherent upon all of us to read that information and ask the questions as to what am I reading and what's the data I'm looking at, as opposed to just believing it because it's an opinion that someone puts out there. Opinions are only opinions. It's your job to make sure you're asking the next set of questions. So 1 question here and 1 question right here, please.
My name is Humphrey Anjoga from Uganda. My question is to all of you. In countries where activism has been labeled as rebels to government and has affected partnership with the private sector, especially the local media, how can activists regain trust of government how can activists regain trust of government in this country so that we can have the civil activists not compromise, so that the civil activists, without compromising their mission and objectives, collaborate with the government as development partners?
Great question. And right here.
Thank you. I'm Yaya Diallo from Guinea. And my question goes to Mr. Bill Carter and Ashoka. We work with schools, primary schools in my country, Guinea. And we sometimes face to barriers, because if you want to build schools, we have to get authorization from government. And how to deal with that? And my last question is, what's your impact in French-speaking countries? Thank you.
All right, can we take one more right here in the front right here? And this is the last question for us, so sorry we're going to have to cut off because I think we're cutting off on time pretty soon.
Thank you. My name is Nasayan from Kenya. My question, I have 2 questions, sorry for being the last, and have 2 questions. One is for Sipho. You've been talking about activism and that the fact that the things that your campaign is based on data and facts. So my question is, how do you relate this with the human face? How do you know this is creating a human face and a social change instead of just data and the damage or the challenge of being abstract in terms of it's just data and it's just a click? How do you make that human and have a change? And the other thing is, we're talking about technology and creating social activism, and how do you reach that to isolated areas, which most of the places are isolated or unreachable, and in terms of they're receiving SMSs, and how do you, and most of the people there are illiterate. How do they interpret this data to achieve what you want to achieve? Thank you.
Boy, these are all tough questions. Nothing like being on stage being asked tough questions. So 2 major questions. One definitely on collaboration. How do you work with government to get to outcomes? And what are ways to actually effectively work together with government on social activism? Is that correct? And then the other question, really looking at Bill, it was specifically to you in terms of they're working with the schools in Guinea, and how do you get authorization from the governments themselves as that's what's needed to make that happen? And I think this last question, very important also, which is how do you make sure that the human face is not lost in just the abstract of data and technology, but that you incorporate the people into this, and then how do you get to the isolated areas? So the challenge for all of you is that we're running out of time. So if you can do this in a rapid format, that would be great. Now, Alesh, I want to make sure I'm going to have you go last on this because I think it's important that you do that. But if we can start with Sipho, Bill, and then Alesh, you close out for us.
Okay, good. So the first question about regaining trust with government, I think that's a really important question. And I do want to point out, in this forum that it's not just about civil society holding governments to account. Civil society has a responsibility to be accountable as well. That's really important. Being civil society is not a license to just do as we wish. It's important for us to be accountable, and the question is, who are we accountable to? So that's something that really has to be considered. I'm not going to go into depth, but it's really important. It's about being accountable equally to the people that we say we represent, who are really the citizens. And I think that's a good way of it's a double-edged sword, it's a double-sided coin. It's about holding government to account, but also holding ourselves to account and agreeing to be held accountable. Then on the second question about a human face, I'll give the example of the Do Agree campaign, which is just closed out. We're actually just closing it out this week. And what we did, that's an example of how we operate on all our campaigns, is we will go from country to country, crisscross the continent, hold policy forums that bring together all of the stakeholders. In the case of agriculture, you bring together the local farmers, you bring the farmers associations, other civil society organizations who are interested in that issue, policymakers who are involved in shaping agricultural policies, the opinion shapers and formers, the local artists. Bring everybody together in a policy forum and have a real discussion about what are the challenges in this country, not in the next country, in this country. What are the challenges? What are the things that we think government can do better? What are the things that we think government is doing well? And then government can also say, this is a role we see for private sector. The farmers can also talk about how some of the policies have harmed them and not helped them. So it's really about bringing the faces and the voices of the real people on the ground to a conversation that leads to sort of real priorities that everyone can agree on. So it's not, it's going beyond just the social media. And we find that's a really important key, is bringing people together, because that also removes sort of the threatening element. When people can sit together in the same room and argue and agree or disagree, that's really important.
Bill?
Yeah, I think the message for activists is that we just really have to raise our game. I think we have to. I think that that pattern of confronting government with problems is a historical one, traditional one. We know it in a lot of different societies. But I think that the challenge now is for activists to become entrepreneurs, to bring solutions, and to start focusing on who are those people in government they can work with. Government doesn't exist, right? You're people, right? You've got to go find the people you can work with, because once they find they can work with civil society groups, they tell their fellow ministers, their fellow governors, and suddenly governors find that they're not in the headlines for being criticized for things. They can be part of solutions. So you just have to be strategic, right? You have to be entrepreneurial. Activism, I think, qua activism is just not isn't viable anymore. That just seems to be the lesson of the last 30 years. And I just, I was just asked a particular question about Guinea. Ashoka's been working in the Sahelian countries since the early 90s. We've got a very strong fellowship in Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Mali, and I'm happy to talk about that, just at ex parte. Yeah, it's like one-on-one communication, but we're not in Guinea yet. Would love to be. And I don't know I frankly don't have an answer to your question of if the government's stuck keeping people from creating schools, how to respond to that. Just off the top of my head, I don't know. Right.
Alesh?
Yeah, I wanted to step on this point of activism and regaining the trust of the government. At first, must mention something. Activism is not always about being against the government all the time. We're not supposed to be in a permanent confrontation with the government. So one
You're hitting a chorus here.
yeah, that's true. I like applauses. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, so one of the solutions that I can say, because we're not there just to point out all the time, we must acknowledge that our government have also some positive initiatives. And yeah, my proposition to you will be to get them involved, you know, from the conception. When you have a project, when you and your organization are planning to do something, because you're supposed to do things to positively impact on the community. And I'm not sure that your government will be against that initiative. So one of the things would be, yeah, to go toward to the government, because you have nothing to lose if the government says no. But in fact, give a try. And if it doesn't work, do it by yourself. Engage other stakeholders apart from the government. Our biggest mistake is always to think that the government is the one with the biggest share, you know, of the charge of the community. But I think that the government, as Bill said, there's no government. A government is made by people, and people mean community to me. And I think that all the stakeholders gotta be responsible at the same level. And then if the government says no, okay, let's go toward other stakeholders and try to make things happen.
So I think, first of all, let's give everybody here a round of applause, because they... Congratulations to all of you, because it is your questions, it is the questions that you ask are seriously the issues that you all are individually also grappling with. And as you see, we're also grappling with them. So this is not something we're going to learn together as this moves forward. But I think the three things you can take away from here: one, collaboration matters. Not just collaboration amongst like-minded groups, but collaboration amongst others that might not be like-minded, because everybody's trying to get to the same outcomes and the same goals. How do we bring them all together to do that? Two, while technology is important and there's an opportunity to leapfrog with technology, in itself, technology is not the answer. It requires working together in groups, putting a human face on this issue as opposed to just the technology itself, but remembering that that's a part of it. And then finally, the world is changing, and it's rapidly changing, and you are part of that change. What you see today as the elements of civil society, nonprofit, for-profit, government, all of those are starting to merge, and how you choose to create the new ways of collaborating, new ways of working, that really is going to be up to you. You're going to create the world that others are going to see. Don't just see the world as you see it today. So think about what you want to create, not what you see in front of you, and that's going to be your responsibility, and we certainly look to you and to learn from you as you do that and move forward. See this group here as a group that helps you facilitate doing more of that and helps you get there. So thank you again, and good luck with the rest of the program.